Lena had always thrived on doing what others wouldn't dare. Her online persona was built around thrill-seeking content, each video pushing the envelope further: urban exploration, midnight dares, and ghost challenges that blurred the line between entertainment and actual danger. So when her comment section became flooded with requests to stream from Westbrook Hospital, the infamous abandoned asylum just outside of town, she didn't hesitate. The building had a reputation for being cursed, a place where even the most hardened ghost hunters refused to step inside. That made it perfect. She prepared for the stream like any other, packed her LED lights, portable charger, backup phone, and a small collapsible tripod. She even brought a basic EMF detector and spirit box, not because she believed in the paranormal, but because the audience loved props. The more real it looked, the more engagement it got. She titled the livestream "Alone in the Haunted Asylum at 3 a.m. live" and set it to start as soon as she stepped inside the crumbling structure. The hospital loomed like a forgotten relic, wrapped in vines and silence, its windows like empty eye sockets staring out into the cold night. The front gate, once locked by the city council, had been broken years ago by other urban explorers. She stepped over the rusted chain with a mocking grin and panned the camera around. The chat lit up instantly. Thousands of viewers poured in. Inside, the air shifted, cold, thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Lena's boots echoed against the cracked tile floor. Her flashlight flickered once, but she shook it off. Classic horror movie timing, right? She laughed to her audience. The comments were already rolling in. Jokes, fake warnings, a few ominous "don't go further" messages. She knew the routine. Room by room, she explored the decaying corridors, narrating her every move. There were abandoned wheelchairs in the hallways, rusted medical instruments still on trays, patient files left scattered as if people had fled in the middle of a shift. Her camera caught every detail, and her audience was glued to the screen. At one point, she passed an operating room with the table still intact. She paused there, noting the bloodstains still faintly visible beneath years of dust. Probably ketchup, she joked, even though something about it looked a little too dark. Around 20 minutes in, the mood began to shift. She didn't notice it right away, but her viewers did. The comments started to change from "lol, she's crazy" to "wait, did you guys see that?" People began asking about movement in the background, a shadow crossing the hall behind her, a reflection in broken glass. She brushed it off at first, assuming it was internet hysteria. But then multiple users typed the same phrase almost simultaneously. Lena froze. Her instinct was to smile, spin the camera, prove them wrong. But when she turned, there was no one there. Just a dark, empty hallway and her own shaky breath. She laughed nervously and continued, pretending it didn't get to her. But now, every step echoed louder. Every shadow seemed deeper. The livestream clock showed it was 3:17 a.m. She entered a small nurse's station, panning her phone to show graffiti-covered walls and shattered drawers. Her chat was going wild now, spamming emotes and messages. Some were begging her to leave. Others insisted there was something right behind her in the mirror she had just passed. She turned back toward the hallway, panned slowly. Then the signal glitched, only for a second. But it was long enough for the screen to flash static, and long enough for hundreds of viewers to swear they saw a tall figure at the far end of the hall, facing her, motionless. She didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge it. But her breathing was louder now, more uneven. The chat noticed. One comment said, "She's pretending she's not scared." Another simply said, "It's getting closer." The live stream had only been running for 30 minutes, but Lena could already feel the weight of the place pressing in on her. It wasn't just the oppressive silence or the way the walls seemed to close in with each step. It was the energy. That started to shift in the air. At first, it had been the typical excitement of an urban exploration challenge. Her viewers were engaged, commenting on every small thing she did, making jokes, daring her to go further. She was used to the attention, the rush of being watched. But now, with every passing moment, the tone of the chat began to change. Her fans were still commenting, but now their messages weren't as playful. Instead, The chat was flooded with urgent warnings, anxious questions, and demands. Did anyone else hear that? Lena, don't go upstairs. She glanced down at the screen, reading the messages as they scrolled past. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure what to make of it. The hospital was old, creaky and full of shadows, but she'd been in places like this before. The odd sounds, creaking floorboards, distant bangs, were all part of the experience. It was a thrill. But there was something else in the chat. Now something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. At first, she thought it was just people overreacting, trying to get a rise out of her. But then, as she panned her camera across the room, she caught something in the corner of her eye. A flicker of movement just at the edge of the frame. She paused, slowly turning the camera to follow the movement. But it was gone. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, the low light, or just the way the shadows played tricks on her, but something felt off. Still, she laughed it off, making a quick joke to keep the mood light. But as she moved deeper into the building, the feeling only grew stronger. She wasn't alone. The comments on her stream intensified, becoming more frantic. He's behind you. Lena, turn around. They were all saying the same thing. She laughed nervously, brushing it off as people getting carried away, as people always did when it came to haunted locations. But as she made her way into the hallway, the static on her screen flickered. For a split second, the image was distorted. It wasn't just a glitch. It was as though something had interrupted the connection, something heavy, something that shouldn't be there. She felt a chill in the air, a sudden drop in temperature that made her shiver despite the warmth of her jacket. Her breath formed small puffs in front of her face, an odd sight given the warmth inside the building. She glanced at the camera, trying to focus, but the light from her flashlight was flickering again, just like the static on her screen. The connection started to stutter. Her phone buzzed with new comments. He's getting closer. Lena turned quickly. Her heart was pounding. She scanned the empty hallway, but there was no one there. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows, something waiting for her to let her guard down. Her laughter sounded forced now, even to her own ears, and she quickly moved to the next room. But the camera was still recording. The comments kept flooding in, each one more urgent than the last. Check the mirror. There's someone in the window. She stopped, turning slowly toward the cracked mirror that hung on the far wall of the room. At first, she saw nothing, just her own reflection, illuminated by the faint light of her flashlight. But as she stared into it, she saw something, a shadow moving behind her. Just for a second, her stomach dropped. She whipped around. There was nothing there, no one. The room was empty, silent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that someone was watching her. She turned back to the camera, trying to maintain her composure. Her breath was shaky now, her movements more erratic. It's fine, guys, she said, trying to sound calm, though the words came out sounding hollow. It's just an old building, nothing to worry about. But the comments were relentless now. They weren't just warnings anymore. They were demands. Leave. Don't go any further. He's behind you. She paused, her eyes flicking toward the hallway. A shadow moved just at the edge of the screen. This time she didn't laugh. She didn't make a joke. She just froze. The isolation Lena felt began to gnaw at her with every passing minute. At first she had been too caught up in the excitement of the stream to notice the shift in her surroundings, the sounds, the subtle changes in the air. But now, the building felt alive in a way that made her skin crawl. She wasn't just exploring an abandoned hospital, she was being watched. The realization crept in slowly, like a cold whisper brushing against the back of her neck. It wasn't just the comments flooding her screen anymore. It was the way her own senses began to sharpen, the way the hair on her arm stood up when she thought she heard something move in the corner of her vision. She spun around at every flicker of shadow, half expecting someone or something to be standing just behind her. But each time she found nothing, just empty, decaying walls, just the faint hum of her equipment. But something wasn't right. The air was too still, too thick. The silence was suffocating. The sounds of her own breathing and footsteps echoed, too loudly in the empty space. It was like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for her. Lena tried to shake the feeling off. She refocused on the camera, laughed, and continued with her usual banter. She told her viewers how cool it was to be there, how creepy the place was, how it was just another spooky hospital. But deep down, she knew she wasn't convincing herself or anyone watching. The fear was there, creeping into her voice, into her every movement. She glanced at the comments, trying to maintain the illusion of calm, but the words flashing on the screen were enough to make her heart race. "Lena, turn around. You're not alone. There's something in the corner." Her fingers gripped the camera tighter, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. It was happening again, the feeling that something was in the corner of her eye, but when she looked, it was always gone, just like before. But the unease kept growing, festering in her mind. She could hear her breath catching in her throat now, too loud in the silence, too real to ignore. The chat had exploded with warnings now, almost like the viewers knew something she didn't. They weren't playing around anymore. "He's getting closer. Don't go into the next room." She ignored them at first, shaking off the panic that was beginning to set in. But as she stepped into the next hallway, the sensation of being followed grew stronger. Her footsteps were louder now, sharper against the dusty floor, and each one seemed to be answered by another. A faint sound, a slow drag of something heavy. Lena stopped and listened. Her eyes darted around the hallway. Nothing. The door at the far end of the hallway was slightly ajar, and she knew she'd seen it closed just a moment ago. She squinted, trying to focus, but the shadows in the room seemed to shift and twist unnaturally. Her chest tightened. The door opened wider. It was like the building was slowly drawing her in, piece by piece, until it had her trapped. She took a step toward the door, her hand outstretched as if to push it open. But the air around her grew thick, like an unseen force was pressing against her chest, urging her to stop. The viewers noticed it too. "It's getting closer. Lena, get out of there now. He's right behind you." She spun around, her heart pounding. There was nothing. The hallway stretched out in front of her, empty and silent. But she could hear something now, a slow, deliberate sound. Footsteps, dragging. The echo was faint, but it was unmistakable. She tried to ignore it, to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the building settling. Maybe it was the wind, the creaking of old floors. But her mind knew better. Her senses were telling her something else, something primal that she couldn't deny. She turned the camera back to her face, forcing a smile, but it felt wrong. The warmth of the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her words, meant to reassure her audience, came out hollow and strained. "It's fine, guys. It's just an old building. I'm fine." But the words didn't land right. They didn't carry the usual confidence. The chat was on fire now, messages pouring in faster than she could read them. But one message stood out, the words so simple, yet they sent a chill down her spine. "Look behind you." She didn't want to. She couldn't. But the pull of the unknown, the pressure of the unseen eyes in the darkness, was too much. Slowly she turned, her breath catching in her throat. The atmosphere in the hospital had shifted completely. What had once felt like an exciting challenge, a fun, spooky live stream for her followers, was now a suffocating trap. Lena felt isolated in a way that was beyond the physical emptiness of the building. It wasn't just the absence of other people, it was the feeling that the very walls of the hospital were closing in on her. The air felt thick and heavy, as if it was pressing against her skin, making it harder to breathe. She could feel the weight of the silence, the way the stillness clung to every corner of the room. Her mind raced as she moved deeper into the building, her steps slower now, more deliberate. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet seemed to echo off the walls. The flashlight's beam quivered in her hand, casting long, ghostly shadows that seemed to dance and shift on their own. The phone's camera trembled with every movement, and it was becoming harder to focus on the screen. The comments that had once been light-hearted and filled with playful dares were now filled with urgency, warnings, and fear. "Lena, don't go further. Get out of there now. There's something moving behind you. It's getting closer." She tried to ignore it. She tried to tell herself that it was just the usual banter from her audience, people who lived for the thrill of seeing someone else take the risks. But deep down she knew something was different. She had been in dangerous places before, but none of them had felt like this. The hospital wasn't just old and abandoned, it was alive with something else. Something unseen. The air around her felt colder now, and she could see her breath misting in front of her face. She rubbed her arms, trying to ward off the chill, but it didn't help. The darkness around her seemed to deepen with every step she took, swallowing her up little by little. She had entered a new part of the hospital, a long corridor lined with broken windows and peeling walls, and the oppressive atmosphere seemed to grow heavier here. It was as if the shadows themselves were closing in, waiting for her to make a mistake. She stopped. The chat had quieted down for a moment, and in that silence, Lena could hear something. A low, dragging sound. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Like footsteps, but they weren't the quick, sharp steps of a person walking. They were slow dragging, as if someone or something was moving with difficulty. Her heart raced in her chest. She turned her head, trying to locate the source of the sound. The corridor stretched out in front of her, the flashlight beam barely reaching the end. But she saw nothing. Just empty, darkened spaces. Her fingers gripped the camera tighter, her knuckles white, and she forced herself to take another step forward. The dragging sound continued, growing louder, closer. It was behind her now, just out of sight. She didn't dare turn around, not yet. The phone screen flickered again, the connection momentarily glitching. For a split second, she thought she saw something, a figure standing motionless in the darkness. But when the feed cleared, it was gone. She couldn't tell if it had been a trick of the light, the way the shadows had moved, or if something had actually been there. But her gut told her it wasn't just her imagination. The dragging sound was still there. Slowly, insidiously, it was drawing nearer. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the comments came pouring in again. She read them faster now, each one, sending a jolt of fear through her. Don't turn around. It's right behind you. Get out of there, now. The urgency in the messages made her blood run cold. She hadn't realized how quickly the fear had taken over until she read those words. Her heart was pounding in her chest, each beat harder than the last, like a drum announcing her impending doom. She was almost paralyzed, caught in the tension of the moment. She couldn't move forward, couldn't go back. She was stuck in the hallway, her body frozen in place by something she couldn't explain. The footsteps, no, the dragging sound was so close now. She could hear it like it was just behind her, right there in the shadows, creeping ever closer. But still, she couldn't bring herself to turn around. It was as though she knew, deep down, that whatever she would see would be far worse than the unknown. The quiet was deafening now, broken only by the dragging sound that seemed to be right on top of her. Every part of her body screamed for her to turn, to face it, but she was trapped in the space between the known and the unknown. She couldn't bring herself to face what was behind her, but at the same time, she knew she couldn't keep moving forward. The door at the end of the hallway felt like an impossible distance away. Lena stood there in the darkness, the beam of her flashlight trembling as she tried to steady her breath. The sense of being watched was overwhelming now, suffocating. It wasn't just the emptiness of the building that had changed, it was the way everything felt wrong. The silence was no longer comforting. It was oppressive, like a thick curtain of air pressing against her chest, making it harder to breathe. Every creak of the old floorboards beneath her feet sounded amplified, echoing down the hall like a warning. The lights flickered again, casting erratic shadows across the room. Her hand gripped the phone tightly, her thumb scrolling through the chat, but the messages were coming in faster now. People were starting to panic. "Lena, there's someone in the next room. Turn around, he's right behind you." Each message felt like an echo of her own thoughts, like the viewers knew something she didn't. She tried to shake it off, tried to laugh it off, but every part of her body was screaming at her to leave. She hadn't noticed how still everything had become. The heavy silence seemed to weigh on the building itself, almost as if time had stopped. The air felt colder, biting through the thin layers of her jacket, but it wasn't just the cold that was making her skin prickle. It was the unnerving sense that something was close, something invisible, but very real. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to move forward, her steps slow and deliberate as though each one could trigger something terrible. But nothing happened. For a moment, the tension in her chest loosened, and she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just letting her imagination get the best of her. She stepped forward, glancing around the dimly lit hallway. It seemed like any other abandoned building she'd been in before. The broken windows, the walls covered in faded graffiti, the rusted, discarded medical equipment. But it wasn't. She felt it in her bones, the wrongness of it, the heavy sense of something watching her. Her footfalls echoed down the hallway, loud and jarring, disturbing the stillness. She reached the next door, hesitating before pushing it open. She wasn't sure why she felt so hesitant, so uncertain. It was just a door, but her hand trembled as she touched the handle, the metal cold against her skin. Slowly, she turned it, the door creaking open on rusty hinges. The room beyond was dark, almost pitch black. The faint light from her flashlight barely illuminated the corners, but as she stepped inside, the air seemed to grow colder still. The oppressive silence had returned, heavier than ever, and the shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor. She moved deeper into the room, the beam of her flashlight bouncing erratically across broken furniture, overturned medical carts, and scattered papers. Everything seemed abandoned in a hurry, except for the feeling that nothing had left. Air felt wrong, stale, like something had been trapped there for far too long. She glanced around, trying to shake off the unease crawling up her spine, but her eyes kept returning to the corner of the room. Something about it drew her attention, though she couldn't say why. Maybe it was just the way the shadows gathered, there, the way they seemed to move, shifting as if they had a life of their own. Her breath caught in her throat as a soft sound echoed from that corner. At first it was so faint, she wasn't sure if it was real, like a whisper, a rustling. But as she listened, it became clearer. It was a slow, dragging sound, something scraping across the floor. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with every passing second. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the sound that frightened her, it was the timing. It was happening in the same moment her viewers started bombarding her with messages. "Lena, what's that sound? Behind you. Turn around now." Her hands shook as she lifted the camera, swinging it toward the corner. There was nothing there, just the empty space, dark and still. But the dragging sound continued, as if the floor itself was groaning under the weight of something moving. Her flashlight flickered again, casting a harsh beam over the corner. She moved closer, though every instinct screamed for her to run. The closer she got, the more she felt the presence, the weight of something watching her from the shadows. The dragging sound grew louder, clearer now. It wasn't just a faint scrape anymore. It was deliberate, slow, calculated. She reached the corner. There was nothing there, just a pile of old papers and broken furniture. But the air felt colder still, and the sensation of being watched was so intense now that it almost made her dizzy. Her breath was shallow, her chest tight, and her fingers gripped the camera with white-knuckled intensity. Every fiber of her being was screaming at her to leave, but she couldn't move. She couldn't take her eyes off the spot. It felt like the world had paused, like time had stopped. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the dragging sound stopped. The silence returned, heavy, suffocating, but this time it was worse.